We would like to call the work session to order, and the time is 5:07. My apologies. We don't have any work session agenda items other than reviewing the agenda. And before we do, if it's all right with the board members, can we add under other business? Is that what you want? Under other business, the request to authorize a proposal of cribbly drilling for the well that is going to be placed in the Apple Ridge Park. We had talked about, there's been several letters. It's a planting season, so Mr. Winters has reviewed it, and we were just, in order to add it to the agenda, everyone has to agree.
Under other business.
Any objections?
No objections.
And then we're going to take this.
Oh, yeah. And while we're discussing the agenda, there's yeah, everyone agree? Oh, I thought, geez. Number 5 on the agenda, we were going to request to award the bid for the Community Resource Center in West Willow Park. West Willow is a community resource center, but after discussion, we think we should just bid it all out together because it needs siding and windows and a roof, as opposed to piecemealing it, and then have someone oversee that. Yeah, it's a request to remove from the agenda.
Don't put your pins away yet.
And then, what else are we going to do?
Remove the truck from authorizations.
Under authorization and bids, we need to remove the award of the bid for the F-150, and the reason for that is the specs didn't have the cab, extended cab in it. And the people who are driving it are taller and would like an extended cab.
And if I could just add on to a little bit, it's not really quite all that. It's that there's storage space behind their seats. If I'm understanding correctly, John can share later why, but my understanding is they just need extra room for storing their clipboards and things they take. Sorry that I'm not doing a better job of explaining that.
Yeah, so the spec sheet went out, and the crucial element of having an extended cab was not included, which was a little bit of an oversight. So with getting an updated price for having the extended cab for the building department, it changed the price. So I actually would like to go back out to bid. That way we give other companies opportunity to bid on this since it's changed so much. The extended cab gives them much more storage room. I mean, also height does play a part in it, but no, mostly the storage room for all the things they bring around from building to building as they're in their truck so much. Tools, jackets, everything in between. Feldman, I believe, Belleville. But hopefully, we did have one ask a question about the cab size. So again, the hope is now that we specify that in there, that maybe we'll get more bids that are more competitive in pricing, because it does change the price a decent amount. Okay.
The first item on the agenda is a proclamation for Workers' Memorial Day. It's in your packet, and it was requested. Is there any questions on the proclamation for Workers' Memorial Day? No? I just had one small, and I think he'll be here, right? Tad?
I'm not sure if he's going to come. Is it? We made one adjustment to the proclamation. It was like right at the bottom where it said
City.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know how to.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
What the proclamation does is it recognizes the safety for the workplace, as well as to have stronger workplace safety and health protections, better standards and enforcement, and fair and just compensation. So that's the first one we've done of these, so I think Tad Weiser, is he from We Rock?
Yeah, Ted Weiser, he helps lead We Rock, and he's also a member of, forgive me for saying it, I think the local letter carriers, I don't know his local number, but letter carriers in any case. Yes, and very active in the Huron Valley Labor Council.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, is there any public comments?
When the resolution made me think about the work that we need to do about safety in our own workplace, so I think that the things that we've been talking about, we probably need to live that part. Because as I read it, I thought, oh, sorry. So I said when I read that, and I thought, and I reflected on our time spent thinking about safety, it just means we've got to work on dealing with the safety with the court and those other places.
We did talk about that, the 3 full-time officials, about, I know we authorized for the Civic Center to be brought up to, at least with the glass and the access, to be tighter than what it is now, because right now anyone can walk in and Stan, did you say you reached out to him? I can't remember. He was an architect, right?
Yeah, I talked to the architects. We met with them again. Their question is, are we going to do anything with the court? Because they don't want to do work on this side and then maybe have to duplicate the services. And if they work on this room, which was a part of it, they just want to make sure what our final goal is before they start work so that we don't duplicate or have to tear up something we just did. So they're just waiting for us to get back to them.
Well, I thought what we were going to do was put up glass like they do in 14B Court and put doors instead of access.
Well, it was new front barriers. It was the counters, everything were going to come out. That puts us into a percentage then where we would have to do this room possibly. And before they got to that point, they just wanted to make sure we weren't ready to do anything else with the court at this time. So we told them we would let them know by May. Plus, we're waiting to see what kind of assistance we get financially from the state.
For the court.
So, right. So if we can get the money from them, but which we won't know until near the end of May, beginning of June, according to Representative Wilson. And I'm supposed to talk to Senator Irwin the first week of May. So we're just trying to see if we can get those monies first so we can do the project as a whole so that we don't duplicate everything. So it's kind of on hold for the moment.
The board authorized in December to have, wasn't it, to do an architect in order to bring the counters space, like you said, and put up some glass between the employees, like they have in the court. They have bulletproof glass. There's nothing here.
They have the resistant glass, but they also have the wood structure in front is also resistant, and ours isn't. It's just wood. So one without the other that's what they did the architectural work. They met with Mike Hoffmeister before he left in December and did all that. So
I would hope we would at least put in the glass and make it safe for the employees here. Remember when that person came in and they were videotaping and we had to put signs up that said you can't come in here?
I might not have understood what Trustee Eldridge is talking about it kicking it or putting it over a certain percentage. So maybe we did agree to do the glass, but I don't know if I understood, me personally, if I understood that there's a point where if we're doing an amount of work and a percentage that it might indicate that we got to do something else. That's what I hear you saying.
it kicks in the ADA compliant.
We'd have more work. So
Well,
if it didn't kick us in, then we probably can do the work that we.
Now, just to put up plexiglass, they can do that very quickly and easily.
and change counters, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about how easy the counters would be because then they would have to, eventually, the way it was drawn up and what I got from Mike's notes to redo the counters, they would also be moving all the desks of the clerks forward, and then they would have to backfill and bring in new furniture to store all the records and everything that are currently under the counters, and based on conversations, that would get us to a percentage where ADA would then kick in. And again, they're trying to figure out how fast they want to go, and do they want to wait and see what the state, if the state will allocate any dollars. Most of that money that we approved for the expenditures was for design work, and John and I looked, we can't find right now any of the other notes as to what those discussions were. I can check with Mr. Hoffmeister, and we have a conversation set up with JRF, I can't remember the initials, so I can ask them then.
Dave is here, he's a building inspector and official. When we changed, completely renovated the bathrooms, we made them ADA compliant. The coming into our building is ADA compliant right now, and this is just a matter of putting up protection for the employees. I think that applies when you're in a space and you're changing that space. Like if you did a kitchen, then you'd have to make sure it was ADA compliant. We did when we change out the fountains have to be ADA compliant. That's my understanding. Dave, do you have any?
Such as this room, where it would be technically feasible to comply with full accessibility, and yep. So the Michigan Rehabilitation Code would dictate what can and can't be done as far as accessibility.
What, the certain percentage? I didn't exactly hear what you said.
Right. I personally, without looking, not knowing what's going on, but just glazing, I would think that would be a level 1 modification, and it wouldn't require a lot of accessibility changes.
Like when we redo this is built in what, 74? Just like our bathrooms, when we renovated them, then we made them wide enough and accessible.
Right.
So when we do the boardroom, we would have to do that.
And that's because you had the space and the ability to make the bathrooms totally accessible to current code. Without a lot of renovation, just looking at the elevation change in this room, it would be very difficult to meet current accessibility requirements. But like I said, through the Michigan Rehabilitation Code, it gives you some outs where you wouldn't have to be totally compliant.
Which, when we do renovate, we always want to be.
Sure, yeah,
ADA
yep.
compliant.
And sometimes it just is technically infeasible, which is why the code gives you those allowances.
So what I thought we were doing was waiting on State Representative Wilson, and here, just to get the protective glass like they have over in the court. And you probably need to do that I think they have it at the firehouse on Ford Boulevard, but they don't have it at the community center. Pretty much anywhere you go, they have that, and it also helps with COVID, of course. We don't want to say that word, I know.
Arloa Kaiser, Township resident. I thought this room was considered ADA accessible, that they just basically had to be able to get in up here and get in and out it wasn't necessary that people be down close to the board. Is that correct?
I'm not a building official, but when it was built to the code that was allowed then. It would be nice to have accessibility down so people could come and have the ability to come down without having to stay way back there. But right now, we have 4, I think, chair spaces in which wheelchairs can be accessible.
Right,
But
okay.
it's not an easy place to navigate sometimes.
So to be ADA accessible, you have to be able to go to all points in a room, is that correct?
That's out of my area of expertise. I don't know, I know even this is a voting location, and it becomes difficult to,
I've never been here to vote, so they vote down in here? Oh, they do, okay.
and they have accessible places for people, 1 or 2.
We have accessible, Ms. Kaiser, we'll put our actual voting stations right down here. We do have a couple along the walls, so you could come in and out, but, even, yeah, we've had several voters trip and fall in this boardroom, which of course as the clerk, I feel not good about. We want it to be easy, and, I mean, even the steps are hard for me to do, like, they're just a weird spacing, so.
I was under the assumption that the voting was done out in front of
No,
the clerk's desk and that kind of thing, because that's where I've seen the old voting.
Yeah, so
So I
the
assume
ones
that's
out,
where you did it.
the ones out in that space that you see, those are for absentee voters or same-day registering to vote voters. And this whole boardroom is not closed, but it's a whole precinct, whereas you go, I think, to Erickson. Is that, any case,
Yep.
the one closest to you is the Erickson School, and so it would be the similar to this whole boardroom. We treat it as a whole precinct.
Okay, like I said, I just assumed that those voting booths that were out there, that most of it was done out there, and you just had more.
Yeah,
Okay,
They're in
thank
here,
you for the
actually.
clarification.
good question. Thanks, Ms. Kaiser.
And we also budgeted, and waiting for the sheriff's department for a contract for deputies to be over there too. But I think they're having a hard time finding people because they contract for people to work at the courts. And we budgeted for them to work here, not here, in the court, as people are coming in. And they do have now armed bailiffs in the court. Right.
Madam Chair.
We did a contract for our architect, right?
Yeah, while the discussion was going on, I was able to go back through and I found a letter from JFR to Mike Hoffmeister. And I'll just read paragraph number 2. It says, their professional services for step 2 was an execute the project remains at 5.8% of the owner's final construction cost, meaning our cost. Based on the current conceptual estimate for the Civic Center work only of just slightly over $2 million. Step 1, define the project, I think is what we approved in December, would be a conceptual estimated professional fee of $119,631. I think that's what we approved, was the conceptual. The actual construction cost for this building alone is just slightly over $2 million for our work. So that letter is dated September 14th of 2022, and I can share that with everybody if you like.
Actually, we've already executed a contract. I say we, the board, executed a contract in November of 2022 for 119,631. And that contract was to perform IT office safety modifications and improvements, civic center boardroom safety, security, and ADA modifications, and civic center service counter safety and security modifications. And the only reason why I would add to the conversation is that in the letter I sent to JFR and to the board on February 20th of this year, I was just asking for a status update in regards to where they stood in regards to step 2 on this portion that was approved. And that's where I think the conversation then said they were on hold because of conversations they had with Hoffmeister one time. But the contract they were authorized to perform was for what I just read. So I don't know, that sounds like maybe that's on hold right now because they were supposed to be preparing construction drawings and contract documents and everything else. I wasn't anticipating $2 million for that improvement, but I don't know. I just think right now there's a $120,000 contract out there right now. I don't know what they're doing. So.
When are you meeting with, what is it, Jay? We'll know more Monday. And then we'll find out in May or June from Wilson. Yeah, yeah. Is what, right? That's it.
Correct, that's what I was told.
Okay. All right. Where are we at? For the consent agenda, we have the minutes of the work session and the regular meeting, statements and checks, and treasurer's report. Are there any additions or deletions or? So on the work session minutes, I would like a little more information on some of the items. I wrote notes on them to the best of my, I didn't re-listen to them, but I did write notes.
Yeah, do you want to table them?
Or I can give them to you, but we can do, yeah, that,
Whatever you
however
want.
you want to do it. But I just, like, it's on the collaborative contracting, exactly what we were doing there, and then on the, I just wrote notes on a lot of the stuff, like I have before. Creating the position was actually reinstating one of the, we, combined 2 positions, and we're working towards restoring them. But, and then on the discussion for the building use policy, there really was nothing in the minutes on that. And Treasurer Eldridge has distributed information. I didn't know if it should be in here, because
Sure.
we did talk
I'm
about it.
Happy to table them if you want.
All right, the work session is, the other ones were just small things. The regular meeting had more information in it, it was helpful, but the work session, and especially if we could have more information on that, that would be great. So we'll table work session.
I mean,
The regular
If-
meeting was,
I think if it's okay with the board, I'd prefer to just table them both. So we can approve them at the same meeting, so it goes in the same packet. Just for
yeah, that's fine.
continuity.
Is that all right with everyone, just to add a little more information on the work session minutes? Statements and checks? Nothing? Treasurer's report? Do you want to talk about it? Working on the letter? Okay. I'm happy about it. attorney's report?
I can defer into after the work session.
Okay.
Maybe covered by some of the information from Gulf Village.
You're talking about the tax.
Yeah,
So for the treasurer's report, I forgot the supervisors, a lot going on. Yesterday, we had a good meeting with the deputy treasurer, myself, the supervisor. We are, if you recall, trying to make sure that we keep the residents informed as to what all the various millages are that they're paying taxes for. Last year, the county moved from a format of breaking those millages down on your tax statement to show you those to one generic millage number. And so if you hadn't kept up through the years on what all the various taxes you were paying for, it would look like a big number coming out every year, especially when assessments on your homes go up and your taxes on your homes go up and there's no reason provided on those tax statements. So in addition to your regular summer and winter tax bill that will come out, we're going to include also a letter, two-sided, that will explain what all those various millages are for, who you can contact at those various offices, whether it be a county office, a school district office, the township, who you can call specifically either to ask your questions or to put them in email format so you have a better understanding of what you're paying your taxes for and why. We're going to send those not only to homeowners that pay through a mortgage company, but those whose houses are paid off. Every home is going to get this letter. It will be, I guess, the first time in township history that this has been done. Pretty close to township history. So we're going to do that and just make sure that every resident, every homeowner understands exactly what they're paying for. Because many times we'll hear the call, or the calls will come in, or we'll hear it at the front counter, my taxes went up $180. Why? I'm not sure it will necessarily alleviate those calls, but at least they will have the information so that they have everything in front of them, and hopefully they'll understand more clearly, especially when other millages come up down the road, and they'll see how that might then impact them personally. So, yeah. So hopefully we'll have that ready to go with the summer tax statement that goes out July 1st.
Is there a way that, I don't know, maybe you guys talked about this, is there a way to have, like if there's a millage, like the year it was voted and then the year that it ends?
So it'll show the year that it was voted in, the first year of the collection, and then the last year of the collection.
Okay, that'd be.
so exciting. Because I know you, board members get it, and I listen to the phone calls in the treasurer's office, and a lot of times, like this, well, I was upset because my value went up, which I guess is good, but the actual tax bill went up $188 because it's the rate of, it's a state law, so don't blame the local government, that if it goes up, the rate of inflation, 5%, whichever is less. And I don't ever remember our millages, our taxes going up this much, but the rate of inflation was what, 8%, 7.9, something like that? So for the first time that I can remember, it went up 5%. So everyone's taxes are going up 5% because their value is going up. So that doesn't include, and next year they're going to go up again, because values, which is good, but it also means your taxes are going up, which, and people, the first people call is the treasurer's office, and they ask a whole lot of questions at the neighborhood watch meeting. They always ask why they're going up, and AAATA will come on in 2024, and people need to get ready, because their taxes are going to go up, and their mortgages are going to go up, and they need to be prepared so they can start now and setting aside money for it. Because it's going, what, 0.7 to 2.38, I think? Yeah, and that's a big jump for people who are on, for anyone, actually. It's just a big jump, and people need to be prepared for it. And I'm so thankful that Stan and Angela are doing this, and it'll be a letter, probably from the board, or?
Yeah, it'll be a letter from the board.
And it's just knowledge. People can still get mad and they can still be upset, but at least they have the knowledge and the why. And I love that they're going to have people to contact, because Willow Run Schools is another one that
We probably hear that question more than any other one.
Eric, so that we're better at speaking to it about, like, I don't know, zones might not be the right term, but every area of the township isn't impacted the same way with the millages. I don't think people necessarily understand that. I mean, even other leaders, because like I raised the issue one time at the county level about the different levels and how it should be more, like people should really know. Like you got to know when you're making these decisions or you're advocating for them, that the impact for different areas. And it was kind of poo-pooed in that, well, it can be looked up on a chart. That doesn't tell what happens in layperson's terms. So I don't know when you're all finished with it. They're probably in the township are, like if you're in this section and you're Lincoln Schools.
School, Lincoln School.
And then you'll see, because even if you're in Ypsilanti Community Schools, the impact is not the same if you're in the former Willow Run District. And then I might be able to help people understand that better when I speak to that, so.
So
we actually, you could probably say we actually have 4 different, because you have Van Buren Schools, the former Willow Run and the current Ypsi, which are different, and then the Lincoln Schools. So, yeah, we have multiples as well.
I think it's good. So just so I'm clear, do you think we should have all the school districts on there? Or?
Stan is not on the letter, but I think as the township whole.
Okay.
Or leadership of the township. Like if you,
No,
we represent all of those areas, and then there's certain people who represent like certain areas. Like I just feel like it would be helpful if we could communicate that so that when people are advocating for things or they're concerned about things, we got a lot of heat over some of our concerns over some of the villages, and that's fine. I can take heat, but I don't think people are understanding necessarily exactly what we're trying to say and how that impacts residents, how that impacts the affordability of an area. And so, that at the end, it comes down to the town, it comes down to the voters, but I don't think people understand what has happened in particular to the Willow Run property. And what continues to happen if we decide to tear things down, or not we, because we're not advocating for something to be demolished or torn down, but like I keep telling people, if you demolish a building that people have been talking about demolishing, you are demolishing a building that people are still paying for, part of that building. So I don't think people understand that. You pass a millage, you agree to build something, and I think that's important for people to know. Like, is that a reasonable thing to decide to do for a variety of reasons? When you talk about the environment and what's good for it, I just don't think people understand. Like, I've been around long enough to know that in those buildings, when people pass that bond, they put multi-purpose rooms on all those schools. Not all of them, but if you demolish a school, they're not paid for yet. I don't even know if you can do that. I don't know if you can demolish them. People are still paying for it, maybe, but I mean, nobody would put an addition on their house and demolish it before you pay the house off. I just don't think somebody would do that. But, when we're dealing with the stewardship of the community, we do need to understand that because it's a big deal to me.
And Stan talked about it before. The reason he brought it, was discussing it in the beginning, one of the reasons is because the Washtenaw County just lumped.
They slumped everything together, and it wasn't very clear, transparent. People that aren't used to reading that type of language, it just made it very confusing.
And then, like it's 4.5 mils for general administration, I think. And then there's like 6, or there's a lot of other little millages, that we've all voted on, that people have voted on, but they just need to, because as much as I know, I called, the mortgage company, you got it wrong. Look, I work at Ypsilanti Township. I don't know what you're doing, raising my mortgage by $188. And they didn't know why. They couldn't explain it either. But then I came back to the assessing and I said, why is this happening to people? And they said it's because the value went up, that is good. But when people buy affordable homes and they can't afford to stay in there because of the taxes, it really puts strain on people. And I know we hear it all the time, and so I'm just excited about actually providing the information. And then, and the board, of course, you guys will all look at it. And
Yeah, we won't send it out till we bring it in here and go over it.
Madam Chair,
it's exciting, yes.
one question I have to trustee, to the treasurer, Aldrich. In that letter, I know when the millage, when the AATA passed the millage, we put out a letter,
A postcard.
a postcard.
Like
Yes,
this
I'm
size.
sorry, a big postcard.
No, a little one.
It was
Was-
tiny, Gloria.
Was it tiny? Oh, well, I thought it was about this
It was
big.
a recipe card.
Okay. But anyway, it explained it very well, right? Regardless of what size it
Good
was.
mailer, yeah.
Huh?
It was a good mailer.
Regardless of what size it was. My question is, will that explanation be in that letter? Because I think people need to know, when they pass that, there's going to be a great hike, right, in the taxes because of the millage. So will that explanation be there also as a reminder, hey, be aware,
In 2024, because that's when it's
taxes
going
are coming because
Yes, it will be.
Yeah.
people have voted on it.
Yeah.
So I just want to know if that piece is in there.
to, yeah.
Yeah, it'll, that would, yes. The short answer is yes. We'll be including the current millages, also letting them know, here's what's coming in your future. This one won't be collected yet in the summer, but it will be collected coming in '24.
In the summer of '24, so
Yeah.
when the bills go out in July of '24,
That's when they'll see it.
that's when they'll see it.
Thank
And
you.
it's just, a good point, Trustee Peterson, so people can be prepared, right? I
Right.
mean, that's all,
Right?
we want people to.
Is there a reason why Washtenaw County consolidated the tax rates?
In my opinion, John, it was simply for simplicity. It's much easier for them to do it that way. It gets very long. Their number of millages, I think we looked yesterday, can run 3 pages long. They've had some instances where there's been municipalities that have forgotten to place those millages on their tax statements, and so people don't see it, and then there's a question of why, and then they have to go back and double collect it years later. So I think they're just trying to make their process on that end simpler for them. The problem in doing that is, well, it just creates so much consternation and wondering why local municipalities and county municipalities are taking their money when there's no explanation. So I think if you just explain to people and you're transparent with them and you're upfront, they may not like it still, but at least they understand it and they have a clear vision of why it's coming out.
It's always good to do new things, so I'm excited. All right, we have the request to approve the proposal from SME to provide monitoring services for the demolition of Galt Village Shopping Center in the amount of $68,500.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm pleased to report that our office has reviewed the proposal from SME to provide oversight, monitoring, and follow-up during the destruction, I should say, of the Galt Village Mall. The proposal is in proper form for your approval. It essentially provides $52,500 for monitoring at $1,500 a day for 35 days. Now, that's assuming that it's only going to take 35 days. And it also provides for an additional $16,000 for follow-up reporting and what have you. And Jason, Planning Director Eichel Angeles, here to further explain that, as is Jason Lafayette from SME, to answer any questions you might have.
Good evening, Township Board of Trustees. Jason Icoangeli, the Township Planning Director. In the packet, you'll find a memo from my desk, as well as Dave Beller's, recommending approval of the hazardous material abatement inspection proposal from SME. The relationship that we have with SME through this entire process, trying to keep that continuity in place, I think is to the benefit of the township, and I think there's some benefit in the fact that we're not starting over or looking to recommend someone new at this point. There's too much that's gone into this process to try to bring someone new up to speed. And I think based on the fact that this process is through a court order, it's also expeditious in that fashion as well. So we're not wasting any additional time trying to find qualified bidders for this work, because SME is more than capable of handling it. So I don't want to speak too much to the proposal and the details. That's why Mr. Lafayette is here this evening to answer questions that you had. I know the last time that we spoke at the board meeting a couple of weeks ago, you had alluded to some more detailed questions about monitoring and things that I just didn't. I was able to answer in broad statements that there will be air quality monitoring, but I think Jason can explain to you a little bit better the details of that and how that they'll be making sure that there's no dust in the air and all those other types of issues that the residents that were here last time had. So I don't want to take up any more of your time on that part. And then, like I said, Jason's here from SME to answer any questions that you might have about the proposal that's in front of you.
Questions? I have a couple. So 10 hours per day is what you think that's what they're going to be working, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. to, this is for the asbestos, right, abatement?
Correct, yes. And good evening, Madam Chair, Board of Trustees. Jason Lafayette with SME. The proposal is written primarily for the asbestos abatement, but also demolition monitoring. Asbestos abatement typically is done 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. It's just a conventional schedule for asbestos abatement. I don't know why that is, but that's what you see typically. For demolition activities, they may transition to 8 hours a day, and but it's likely because Homrich specifically is they don't have a subcontractor to perform the abatement. They're all self-performing. It's likely that they'll continue with that 10-hour schedule. So they did provide a preliminary project schedule with their bid. That was that 93-day calendar day project schedule. Mm-hmm. But with that being in mind, they didn't provide a work day until they were ready to be approved and going through that, which we're actually working on right now to get final submittals after the approval of Homrich to clarify some of those things. But that's why the proposal was written the way it was.
At our meeting 2 weeks ago, residents attended and they were concerned about the abatement process. And how does that happen? Does it get into the atmosphere? Do you remove the asbestos first? And we thought the answer was yes, but Jason was careful not to say anything out of his lane, I guess, but.
Good call. I'll clarify. So, yes. So it's yes and no. So there's certain materials that in a building that EPA says are dangerous to the public and have to be removed before a building could be demolished. So those materials will be removed before the demolition occurs. And SME, if awarded, would this proposal, we would be monitoring during the removal of those materials, as well as perimeter monitoring between the work activities and the public or the residents, mm-hmm. To monitor for release of fibers in that capacity during abatement. Once those EPA required materials are removed from the building, certain asbestos materials are allowed to stay in a building during demolition because they're not as likely to become airborne and present a hazard to the public and to air quality. So in that capacity, those would stay in the building during demolition, but the combination of both dust suppression techniques that will be utilized and that continued perimeter monitoring will be the mechanism to demonstrate to the public and residents that there is no fugitive releases that would cause harm to anyone.
So is there an actual monitor equipment that's in the back of it for demolition, or
There will be. So
all around it, or just in the back of it?
there would be, yeah. So there would be stationed sampling pumps between the building and the residential properties to monitor the actual concentrations of those contaminants concerned before, in advance of the property boundaries. So the two, I guess I'll get a little technical with it. So
I like it.
So the two different types of analysis would be one for asbestos fibers specifically, which is a contaminant concern, and the mechanism to do that is PCM analysis, and what that is phase contrast microscopy, and what it does is it actually, you collect a sample on a cartridge, you take the filter out of that cartridge and you dissolve it and put it on a slide, and you analyze that slide and count the fibers. You're not actually counting asbestos. It's more conservative than that. It's looking at every fiber that you pick up and counting that as if it was asbestos. So it is by far the most conservative approach, comparing that to the most restrictive criteria. So if we're below that criteria, by far and means, it's below some type of an exposure threat. With respect to other contaminants like lead and cadmium, things that could be in the building, we'll collect additional samples for that, and those are analyzed by a laboratory, and we would have periodic analysis of that to monitor those activities, and then hold the other samples if any type of elevated concentrations are found in the samples.
I have a couple of questions that might get confusing to myself. I thought I don't know if it was a previous meeting or, yeah, it had to be a previous meeting. I thought I understood most of the asbestos to be in the floor, in the paste.
Tile.
Yeah, paste
Yeah.
between the tile and the cement.
Correct. It is. It's in the tile mastic. So from an exposure concern, it's fairly low risk as it relates to that type of material, because asbestos found in floor mastics, it's bound in an organic matrix in the bituminous material, and so it does in itself present less risk in that capacity. It does have to be removed for a project like this in this capacity, because once the building's gone, even though it is bound in that matrix, that mastic would now be on the surface of the concrete without a building and be subject to weathering, environmental conditions, and what will happen is it'll become dry, brittle, and it will degrade and turn to dust, and now that presents an airborne hazard. So what could happen to it in the future is much more risky, I guess, if you will, than the actual removal using engineered techniques.
The last question. Is there I'm trying to think of a chance that if there's a standard, I don't want to say rate of approval, a standard measure of approval to the EPA versus the amount of air that will still get into, the amount of asbestos that will still get into the air that the residents will experience. Even though it's not considered dangerous, there's still some asbestos in the air.
Sure, good question. So the target criteria that we would use for this project, it's 0.01 fibers per cubic centimeter, and that criteria is actually the EPA-approved criteria for clearance after an asbestos abatement activity in a school. So when you look at extremely conservative criteria, that is not the highest allowable concentration by means, because the state of Michigan has, construction clearance as well, but we would use that more conservative clearance criteria as a mechanism to show with high level of confidence that the residents were not exposed to any fugitive asbestos fibers that would have migrated past the property boundaries that could be of any harm to them. Okay. If that, being as conservative as we possibly could.
And by conservative, you mean safer?
Right. So most restrictive criteria. Yeah. Yeah. So, and if I'll elaborate that if by some chance we did have a concentration in a sample that was shown above that extremely restrictive criteria, we would immediately stop and employ additional dust suppression techniques, evaluate what the negative pressure enclosures are doing, look at other engineering controls to immediately reduce that from the environment. Yep. You do. Yep.
So I have a couple. So when you talked about that there'd be some asbestos that would still be there and wouldn't be taken out because there were two different kinds. So it gets demolished, and then I know that I think your contract and the other contract talk about like where that's going to go, like being really careful about where it gets disposed of. So does that mean all this demolition stuff is going to, because we wouldn't know once it's demolished what's got asbestos in it that was left that wouldn't. That means it all goes someplace that's appropriate for disposing, because there'd be asbestos that's still left that isn't taken out, that's going to have to go to a safe place.
Correct. Yeah. So all of the waste will go to an appropriately licensed landfill. So ironically, in Michigan, because of changes in landfills, they'll likely go to the exact same place, which allows both. There used to be type 1, type 2, and type 3 landfills in Michigan. There's not so many anymore. I believe there's 2 type 3 landfills, and type 1 is the most hazardous waste accepted, going down to type 3, which would be residential garbage, essentially, and construction and demolition waste. Because of the volumes and changes in landfills, most of those type 3 landfills have just migrated to type 2 landfills, I think for logistics and management of the landfills. So likely those will both end up at the same landfill. But yeah, to answer the question specifically, any type of waste material will be properly handled.
And so my next question is about the pad, because I know when you came in, you talked to us about the pad and why the pad has to stay in place. Is the asbestos tile that you talked about that could get dry and brittle, is that directly on that pad? Like what's left, I know it's got to be removed, but the pad that's underneath that we're going to keep intact, that we're not going to disturb, is that asbestos, massive, whatever, what that is that right on top of that pad, or is there a layer underneath? Like, how are they going to make sure that's off that? Is it on the pad, I guess? And then if it is, how do you get that off? Because the pad's going to be left there.
Yep, good question. So the answer is yes. It's directly adhered to the pad, the mastic is, and then by proxy, the tiles associated with that mastic also are. Some of them are in such poor and weathered condition that you can actually walk up and just pick up the tiles. They're not so much adhered anymore. But so for specifically with the mastic, the glue that's stuck to the concrete, that's removed, and it's a performance-based criteria for the contractor, but is removed either by floor grinding in a negative pressure enclosure or by use of a low VOC chemical solvent that basically turns it to sludge, and then it's scraped off and removed. Yeah.
And that's done it must be done after demolition if some of those tiles are going to stay intact when they're demolishing it?
Likely, they'll do most of that while the building's standing.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because it's, if they're planning to use a floor grinder, which we've had some preliminary discussions, they probably will, it's easier to construct that enclosure with the walls of the building still up. Otherwise,
Control the dust too, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
and
there's a lot of dust when you're grinding it.
Right, and that's an absolute requirement to have that enclosure if they're going to use a grinder like that. So using the standing building walls as a frame, essentially a superstructure for that containment, it's much more effective, cost-effective, and just logistically effective than demolishing the building and then constructing a new, enclosure with framework to be able to perform that removal.
So the residents that did come, and we had quite a few that came to the last meeting, I mean, they are grateful for the idea that we're looking at this, but they're afraid of what's going to happen because this is right in their backyard. Most of the people that were here are people who are right there on it. And of course, we're not experts. Like, we have to trust experts that are telling us. Is there anything that, like, we should be recommending that neighbors do, like, before this project? I mean, like, because we're probably going to get the information out to them, but if there's anything that you think with your level of expertise that we need to be telling residents to prepare for this, we need some help knowing that, because we have a relationship with you and we trust you, but we just have to know that these are people's homes, it's their livelihood. Some of the people said they've lived there their whole life, their grandchildren are there, and so we want to be conscious of something that we're happy is, not happy is not the right word, that needs to move forward because of the state of the building. We just want to make sure that we handle the trust that they're putting into us in a way that meets that expectation.
Sure. And, I can say, trust us, we pride ourselves in that, the capacity, the project monitoring capacity that we would be entrusted, that we operate at a very high level. And I normally don't speak against other consultants, but we stand above most in the capacity for this type of work that we would propose here. But I would, it might be prudent also to provide notice to the residents also. There's a notification that's required to the state before the asbestos removal and before the demolition, but there's no state-required notice to adjoining residents or anything. But I think that would be a very good faith and prudent thing to provide notification of that schedule and let the residents know this is upcoming and this will be happening, not just for transparency of the project in general, but also, when you get into this type of work with asbestos removal using machinery, demolition, it's noisy. There's more than probably just their concern of environmental impact, but there's a inherent nuisance to demolition work, right? Or any type of loud mechanical work near your home. So I think that would be prudent. We could do that.
So it could be like, here's a schedule, here's what you might expect, and then also maybe some of the things that we've done to help, like making sure that you're on site, making sure that testing is, making sure those things so that residents can feel some semblance that they know what's going on and possibly what to expect.
Right, and like I said, we'll be collecting essentially very close to real-time data for this work. We'll be collecting samples every day. We control that data in whatever capacity the township would approve, but there's no reason if the township doesn't oppose it that we can't make that information public and post it at the job site also.
Yeah.
So, I know we have, for an example, construction sites where we do this type of work, and there's some type of an asbestos abatement going on inside the building, but there's peripheral work that's non-asbestos related, and there's non-asbestos personnel, other carpenters, contractors doing other work that don't have the personal protection equipment or any type of the asbestos training and are working, in close proximity to the work, we'll often take and make printouts of our results and post them and just make those available so people can see you're working in this area, these samples were collected at these locations, and here are the results. And this is what those results are compared to so that you can understand what that means.
So people should, do people keep their door, like the windows closed, or things like that people get recommended, or?
If that makes them more comfortable, I wouldn't want to recommend that because it infers that there's a danger that we're there to ensure there isn't. But if that makes them feel more comfortable, sure. And so hopefully the temperatures will rise high enough that the air conditioners come on and the windows close. But yeah.
Is it, asbestos was used and authorized in buildings and houses, right, a long time ago. I was just wondering, I hope the state requires everyone to do what we're doing to protect the public. If it's a private contractor, do they have to go through the same steps? I hope, but I have a feeling they don't.
So yes and no. Asbestos regulations are somewhat of a wicked web, but asbestos was used in building products for many, many years. There's kind of somewhat of a false assumption that asbestos was banned and that it stopped being used at some point in time, but that's not entirely true. The asbestos ban that happened was quickly repealed because of lobbying, so there was a very small fraction of building materials that are to this day still banned to be manufactured with asbestos. So, for instance, buildings constructed today can have asbestos in them, and we've found it. So it exists out there. EPA was still successful in reducing asbestos in building materials in a way that's in materials that are more friable, which means more readily capable of becoming airborne and fibers in the air, which is the inherent hazard with asbestos. It's an incredible mineral. It's an amazing building product. If it didn't hurt you breathing it in, it would probably be the best building additive that's ever existed. But it does, so it's dangerous. As it relates to requirements for removal and monitoring with public projects, so anytime that a project that's not exempt from the EPA's NESHAP regulation is
Should do it.
then it's mandatory. This type of air sampling and monitoring is required for any type of regulated asbestos material covered under the NESHAP. So that's true, and that's the case. OSHA also has certain monitoring requirements for employees engaged in the work. There are certain components where if it's an exempt property from the NESHAP, for example, your own home, kind of your king of your castle, there aren't asbestos regulations. So somebody could engage in a DIY project and go in and start aggressively removing things from their house, and there's really no regulation to bind them from doing that. And ironically, they could take that material and put it in the garbage out on the curb, and again, there's no regulatory framework to bind them from doing that. But I shouldn't be saying all this out loud. But
No, I mean, it's good to know. I know that when we did anything at the community center and upstairs here, we had tiles, and we had to go through those steps to make sure they were remediated properly and removed and disposed of in a proper, I mean, it was expensive, but it was a safe way to do it.
Yeah. And
it's too bad that it's not required by everyone.
And there's the regulatory liability, but then there's also just probably civil liability also, that, if you are removing asbestos in a way that could cause harm to other people, I'm sure that you're not completely.
We need to change that law.
Yeah. Well,
So everyone has to do it. The only thing I question, it says that tasks 1 and 2, and it said that the fee and scope of services does not include responding to comments by third parties. What does that mean?
It's somewhat of a general comment, but it means that we are reporting to the township that, for instance, if, there's other parties that, wanted to receive,
So if a resident came up and asked a question, is that a third party? Is that what you deem it?
No.
I'm just trying to.
I think in this capacity, a lot of times there's sensitive projects, so it's kind of a default language really with our proposals, to be honest. But there's situations where we on most projects, unless it's specifically requested, we don't prepare draft documents and draft reports, and we don't respond to a litany of questions from other entities and organizations. But in this capacity, if there's a resident that has a concern, yes, we would certainly answer any questions to make them feel better.
You explain it much better than we would. I like the way you explain things, but I was just trying to figure out who the residents could talk to that could be as eloquent as you are in explaining it.
They could absolutely speak to us. That's the capacity that we're functioning in. There's other projects where there's somewhat of a sensitivity to the project, where you have interested parties wanting to ask what's happening. There's some level of confidentiality there, but I think that could be dismissed for this project.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Just one more. Will your company do the remediation, or do you subcontract?
We don't do remediation in any capacity. So
maybe remediation was the wrong word. Whatever it is you're doing, asbestos removal.
So the asbestos removal.
Monitoring.
Yeah, the asbestos removal and the demolition, that will be performed by Homrich, Inc.
Okay.
The third-party monitoring, that would be SME's role, where while there's abatement or while there's demolition being performed, we're performing the monitoring both from the physical and analytical sampling of materials, the air, in that capacity for this project, but then also, monitoring the contractor's work effort also. So there's certain OSHA requirements, there's certain EPA requirements of the way that the work's performed, and so we have an active role in monitoring that and interfacing with the contractor during the work to ensure that those are being met.
Okay, thanks. So if a resident, they would talk to you, your SME, to get a better understanding.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I would think that if a resident has a question, direct them to us,
Okay.
I can't, I would trust them to talk to us directly rather than asking Homrich, for example, or somebody else on site.
That's why we kind of hired you as a third party, is to, not that Homrich, they're very well respected, nothing against them, but then you're a safety net for the residents and community of the board to make sure that they're doing everything according to EPA and the state laws. So I like the idea of having like a manager over that to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and that can answer questions to residents, because they had great questions at the last work session and board meeting. And I love the way you explain things. It's very simple because you have so much knowledge.
Yeah.
I would definitely use the wrong word if I had to.
Yeah, I would, and I would say both Homrich and SME, if retained for this, we're both functioning for the same goal, working for the same, township. But, I would say that their role is more of the direct remediation role. Ours is a quality control, quality assurance role to verify that and give comfort that it's being done appropriately.
near you, because there's gonna, like, if you're on site and Homrich is on site, like, there'll be a perimeter around where residents aren't just gonna be able to walk up and say,
I was going to add, sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Trustee Swanson, it seems to work well to disseminate the township's planning department's number to residents, to have the calls come in through our office, and then we triage them and get them to the appropriate parties. So if it's a general contracting question, we may be able to ask the site superintendent. If it's something tied to the environmental portion of it, then we can relay it to Jason and take names and phone numbers and have the right people call back, so they're not being bounced around to, different people. It's worked well with a lot of other construction projects around town, and we probably want to keep that way of doing it. Seems to work best for our residents, and they get to the right people quicker, so we could offer that, to use the planning department as sort of the clearinghouse for calls as they come in during this process.
and it allows us some logging in, like, we be able to coming in.
Yes.
Yeah, logistically, there will be site security fencing around it, so it'll be a challenge for somebody to, in a good way, it'll be a challenge to keep residents from, migrating onto the site, because it's dangerous. It's a demolition, it's a work area. I know that they'll be compelled to do that. So it's a good thing having the security fencing up there, both to, restrict access from residents or any other type of, unauthorized visitors that might want to traverse the site for whatever reason. But that in itself will somewhat kind of prevent their ability from asking questions. So I agree. There's, there can be a forum for answering those questions. I could volunteer my number also if there's technical questions.
Yeah, there's about 15 residents or so when we walked it, and they're like right up behind it.
Yep.
So they're the ones that I know would want to know more. They were asking great questions. I mean, just really good questions, so.
They say there are rats. Vermin.
Okay.
So they're pretty clear. We're working on it, but they were pretty clear when they came, just, I know you were here and we discussed it. If there aren't any, they're pretty clear that there are vermin.
Yeah. I don't, that's not my area of expertise. But I wouldn't, I don't know that there aren't any, but when we were on site originally with an exterminator, based on their observations, they didn't have reason to believe that there's a significant infestation, which is good news. But
I think Evan Pratt said that today as well, that the traps are out and they're also inside.
Yeah, actually, today, Evan, Paul from Orkin was on the phone with myself and Brenda, and in regards to the follow-up from the last meeting, he's been inside the building. He's put in 30 so-called snap traps. When he was inside the building, he again reiterated that there was no evidence of any kind of food or any kind of a rat infestation, but to err on the side of caution, he did install 30 snap traps, and he would be going back and checking on those in the weeks ahead before the demo gets underway. He also has placed a significant number of what they call bait stations outside the Galt Village on the perimeter, and I thought he said as many as possibly the 30, 38 number. And he said there have been some, at times, maybe some evidence of field mice, which, he said, would be expected. He said probably having the mice there was a good sign there weren't any rats, because according to him, the rats eat the mice. So I don't know how the food chain how the food chain in nature worked its way through this, beyond the fact that right now I think that we have, seriously, the snap traps are in place, the bait stations are in place, and the monitoring goes on, but I think they're going to be okay. Now, there may be other things going on. I think someone mentioned there was the Miller Drain was doing some work over there in the neighborhood.
The Miller Pipe, yeah.
Pipeline, rather. And they were doing some work over there that might be causing some disturbance. But again, everybody that's been inside that building from a more of a rat background would at least indicate that there's not any real evidence of activity there. And so, but
In the
there-
building.
In the building. Or on the perimeter as much as what you might otherwise expect for the reason I just gave. But in regards to the mice and the rats. But so I think right now that we're in pretty good shape in terms of monitoring it. And as the days unfold, and they're going to continue to monitor it. Orkin really is one of the best well-known business entities that specialize in this. And the Paul individual specifically knows what he's doing, I believe. So I guess we'll give you an update in regards to what happens with the snap traps in the weeks ahead. Otherwise, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Did you learn something, Jason?
It's still not clear if rats eat mice.
Yeah,
but
I think, I don't know.
If they do, I didn't know that, so that'd be new
I'm just quoting
information.
the source of the expert.
But the good news is that we're really trying to address the neighborhood concerns and the public and the safety of everyone, so.
Yeah, full transparency, and to Mr. Winter's point, we have been involved with projects before where with heavy construction, rats exist in sewers, and, once you start disturbing different types of sewer lines, you might get some mobility of rats inside of the sewers, and they may choose to leave that because of the vibrations from the machinery, but I guess, I don't know how you control that in that capacity.
Actually, the township has been under contract with the Evans office also, and they're actually also baiting the actual sewers. I'm not really sure exactly. The township continues to receive those through Brenda's office in regards to their efforts on also trying to bait the sewers themselves. Because
Storm sewers.
Storm sewers. So I guess they're like tunnels of where they can exist. But anyways, I think that but that's been going on long before the demolition came into play, really. So I think it's continuing on. This continues today.
Yeah. We tried to tell DTE that when you disturb, and even Yucca, when they do water and sewer lines, that, the vermin are coming up. And they said that they've never heard of that before. And I'm like, it's common sense. It always happens. When they were doing construction in US 12, road work, water sewer work, storm drain work, demolition, anything, right, that just makes noise, I think.
Yeah.
Causes them. So they'll run in their little snap trap and get caught, hopefully. That's the only thing we can do.
They're big traps.
Yeah, they are. All right.
So the only other thing I would say that really isn't a question, I just think the earlier we start drafting whatever it is that we're going to send out to residents, the better, just so that we can make sure that some things the schedule, we don't know that yet, but we could start drafting kind of an outline of what's going to go in there so we can get many eyes on it. We can look at it. It can be ready to go so that there's a time period where the people can see it before, it's Monday and it's going to start Wednesday. That's not a good way to look.
And we have a neighborhood watch meeting, that's a good point, next Monday. Yeah, there'll be questions.
Okay.
You allow it to start, right? It's going to kick off now that you're in place, and they have 94 days from...
Yeah, so the intention was this week, we would issue the notice to proceed for Homrich, and so that would start the clock, essentially, on the project schedule. And there's a little bit of legwork and upfront approvals before any actual work can be done, such as there's notification to the state for awareness of the abatement and the demolition. There's the necessary utility disconnects through Yucca and otherwise utility providers, and then permitting, getting the necessary permitting, and then executing a contract between the township and Homrich with all the necessary backup paperwork, bonding, insurance, things of that nature. And some of those things will be happening in the background during the notification period. But once all of that comes to fruition, then yes, they could arrive on site, and first thing is security fencing, setting up the perimeter, mobilizing equipment, and then beginning with abatement. So
Jason, you'll get.
Yeah, I'm going to coordinate with Jason and I and Dave Beller spoke a bit on the phone, and we've brought Denny and Doug up to speed, but the way that Jason's going to draft the letter of intent or notice to proceed. And then in the meantime, like I explained to Mr. Winters and Mr. McLean, Homrich is going to work on putting together the contract using an AIA format and getting the necessary bonds and insurance together. And they're going to get that to Jason to look over. And then once Jason fly specs their contract, he'll get it to Doug and to Denny for their review. And then the final step will be for you and Clerk Rowe to execute that document. So the first step for us, at least, is to get that notice to proceed out to Homrich by the end of this week, which Jason was just saying kind of gets the clock ticking on that 90 days window. And while in the meantime, while we're getting all those documents together and that contract together, they'll be working on that while they also start to make plans for getting the fencing lined up, starting to work on thinking about how they're going to get the permits to do the shut-off notices and all that other kind of thing. So it really will start, the kickoff will happen with this letter to proceed this week. And that'll we don't have firm timelines just yet. We're thinking that our best guesstimation at this point is if the letter goes out to Homrich this week, that within about 3 weeks is when things will start to really kind of heat up as far as getting fencing out to Galt Village and starting to see action and all that other kind of a thing. So,
all right. Any other comments? Thank you very much. The next item is a request to approve the professional services with Ernat Consulting to submit the Department of Energy Efficient Block Grant in the amount of $6,500. And this block grant is to replace the HVAC rooftop units at the community center with much more energy efficient HVAC, which is heating and cooling. So we talked about the last work session, but this is actually bringing it forward. Any questions? I'm so glad we have a grant writer now, too, to keep us moving forward, trying to get grant. The next item is precision concrete cutting for sidewalks, and John Hines is here as well. We did a pilot project last year in Apple Ridge and Bud and Blossom. So this technology, if there is a heaved sidewalk, it will, there's probably a more professional term, but shave it off and make it even. So they continue down Holmes Road for Rudeville, Ruwellette, and the Holmes Road area, and identified a little over 1,000 addresses or sites in order to level it off so it's safer for walking, and the amount of it is $152,694.47. I'm not sure why people do that. John?
John Hines, Recreation Director. So this was, as Supervisor Stumbo said, a pilot program we did last year in the Apple Ridge and Bud and Blossom neighborhood. This company is very unique as it has 6 patents in terms of their technology, where the board's previously approved contract leveling and sidewalk leveling and replacement. This is actually sidewalk shaving, as mentioned, And it's a much kind of smoother process in terms of just going out and instead of lifting or taking out and replacing, they do just shave it to be ADA accessible and walkable. So per Attorney Winter's letter yesterday, they did send a more detailed list. They did not send every exact address list, but they sent a list with a address range with how many cuts they projected in that neighborhood. And when they had done last year, they plan to do this year, is when they are done with the work on their invoice, they'll send the addresses that were cut as well as how many cuts were done at that address.
Are these specific neighborhoods or streets in Ypsi Township, or how do they go about?
Yeah, so this was a list we sent them just on some of the older neighborhoods in the township that had not been addressed as much for the sidewalks. So we had them go walk and just kind of give us their kind of overview on what needed to be done there, and this is what they came back with when they did those neighborhoods. Mm-hmm.
And I know at neighborhood watch meetings, people bring this up all the time, and if there's a trip hazard and it's marked, John has been sending, depends on what's needed, if it needs to be raised up or shaved off, then instead of a replacement, so.
Well, and the nice thing about this service, though, too, and what kind of one thing they really sell with their technology is it's really more preventative than reactive. Because our current system with the leveling and replacement is when residents do let us know it needs to be done, or our staff go out and see it needs to be done. The nice thing about this is instead of just hitting one or two sidewalks at a time, they do hit the entire neighborhood.
And the original cost was $196,321
Yes, and we got a municipality discount.
to $152,695. So we would like to keep going and do the whole township. So we took the farthest east, north, and then we went up Holmes Road. We got to come back down and keep going, you know. And we still have lists of sidewalks that we are repairing and replacing as people bring it to our attention. But like John said, this is more proactive and sending people out to look for it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
will any of this work allow for accessibility to potential shelter sites for AAATA stops? The sidewalk repairs? Because in order for AAATA to provide us with shelters, those sites need to be accessible by sidewalk?
No, these are interior to subdivisions. On primary roads, if they walk the primary roads, they could, but we actually have to install sidewalks, like on Ridge Road and we have to.
I thought these might be separate, but I just wanted to
That's
clarify.
a good question, yeah. AAATA likes us to install access totally to, and we're going to start doing that. We did it on Hearn River Drive, and hopefully we'll get AAATA to put one in at Ridge and Clark.
Yep.
And another area, Huron Street. So this right here is interior to subdivisions. It's not bus stops.
Okay.
Like on Harris Road and the primary road. But it would benefit anyone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, getting it.
Thank you.
Any other? Oh, we did two as a pilot to see how it would work, and the residents had positive feedback on it. And we did Apple Ridge and Bud and Blossom, and this is Rue DeVille and Rue Willette and Holmes Road area. We'll keep going if, no, well, I don't think so.
The rest we have planned and budgeted for is the replacement and raising.
Plus, I think they would have to, yeah. No, we We did 2 neighborhoods, and this will be 2 other areas in the township down Holmes Road. We could have them walk more and give us estimates.
Yeah, we could get quotes.
But like in West Willow, some of the residents are walking and giving us lists. So Galt Village is another one that they walk and,
So if they've done that, then we're attorney, they'll really give somebody a walk and say, it's not in this room. And we get it, we already, we don't go and act on those.
yes, those are usually removal.
Yep.
Those are usually removal and replacement, unless we can pump it up.
Yeah, so currently we have either website or they can call it in or an email that'll go to a list that we put in our work order system. So we'll send our crew out to take a picture of it, mark it if it is a trip hazard. Then the list either gets sent to CLI or Saladino to get within a near immediate time frame. It's usually, with the weather right now being as dicey as it's been, CLI, for example, is going to go out May 1st to get all the lists we've sent them, and Saladino, I think, is about the similar time frame.
But we go out and mark it when we
Yeah,
get the
we do-
call.
we do
go out
mark
and-
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
put
right-
a spray paint on so that it's more visible as a trip hazard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good program.
Yep.
The next item is a support for the Washington County Water Resource Commissioner's Office for ARPA grant. We talked about this before. Are there any questions on it? Number 5, we agreed to remove that from the agenda. Number 6 is a request approval of the purchase agreement with DTE for the installation of 12 streetlights on Ridge Road from Michigan Avenue to Mott Road. Any questions on that? This came out of Neighborhood Watch meeting, and also for the improvements for CBDG and the Apple Ridge Park area, and that includes the sidewalks. And so the streetlights will make it complete, and it is dark over there, so make it, safety is important, yeah. Yeah, that's what one lady approached us, Gloria, remember? Right, access. Yeah, for access, right? Budget amendment number 5. It was to rebudget for State Street sidewalk project. It was in West Willow and it's still not completed, so we rebudgeted it, and to make sure that it's done right and approved, we had to rebudget for it. We did part of it, but not all of it. The next item is to allow the shaving of the selected sidewalks, which was $152,000. For BSNR 2, it was for the purchase of trees to be planted in the parks and properties. One of the ideas for planting trees, I know as you go through the master plan process, but they have living fences that separate, the trees, and it looks like a fence, but it's a bunch of trees that actually provide better for the environment, and it's a softer separation than an actual fence between neighborhoods and some of our parks. Ford Lake Park is one where the soccer field is there, and the dogs will just run over when there are kids playing with a ball, which, of course, that's what they do. So the trees would help with that barrier without being a 6-foot or 4-foot fence. And so this is something we're going to try, and during the master plan process on the parks, if that's what the residents want, it comes out of the master plan, we could also do it in the neighborhood parks. The next item, what's that?
On the budget amendment, in your packet, it still has the thing for the truck that we're not going to be moving forward with tonight, so I just won't read that motion from the budget amendment. It's the last one.
That was for the building department. All right, we'll take that up.
Areas that are not in the good lawns. Like, I know that there are some areas, like, this isn't gonna pick up all the trash in all the areas, right? So.
Oh, are we, I'm sorry, that's
I
okay.
went to the truck, so I was hoping that we would
Yeah.
talk about one, the request to award the bid for highway and street trash cleanup. It looked like it had just a few streets listed, and then I wonder, like, what happens for other areas that might need picked up.
We send them.
We send them.
We send them to pick up throughout the township. We just had Merritt Road had a big issue. Sometimes Wired Road, Ford Boulevard, just,
Yeah. I had a resident just say, because they saw just specific streets, and they were worried about, like, the Michigan Ave, Hewitt Road over in that area. So we just let somebody know.
well, residents call in and let us know. And, oh, plus you can see it, right? We see it too, and our workers go out sometimes and pick it out on wherever, like, if we can.
Yeah, so
get
just because there were streets named in this, so I had a resident ask me, and they said there are other areas, and so it's these areas as a rule, but if there's another area that gets reported, someone will go out and take care of it.
Yeah,
That's what I hear
that's
from
how we've been doing it.
Okay,
Yeah, either they will or internal staff.
okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
My question is, would this company, and I think we hired them last year, be going out to West Willow in that area where all the new work is done with the roundabouts, where people be throwing on the trash? Will they be going out there maintaining that? And also, whose responsibility is it to cut that grass? I think it's going to grow pretty good this year, looking good. Is it the county? Is it the township? Will they be doing that area? And also, the bridge area. When the final construction's done, who would go out there to possibly sweep the island of the little rocks out there to try to get all the little weeds that's in the crack or spray, or who would go out there to clean up after they take all their stuff, if they get done? Who would maintain that? The entryway of our township also.
They can, if it's on our township and we ask them to do it, they will do it. So
But if not, if you don't ask them to do it, is it the responsibility of the township? Do we have enough staff? I think, I don't know if we have enough staff to cut grass, and this is why we hired this company, is that correct?
Correct.
So if you just, I guess, if
Yeah.
that's going to be one of the priorities, you just will have to ask or put in a work order or something like that?
Yeah, reach out to their owner, Dave Dillon. He's been pretty receptive to whatever you talked about, where it needs to be picked up or mowed. He's very responsive.
All right, thank you.
Because it's actually a MDOT road, and it's maintained, but it's really not maintained by the road commission.
Which one are we talking about? The
US 12, Michigan Avenue, and
Yeah.
all of the Clover lanes, and,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I thought that's what someone had said, that is maintained by the county. It's not really, huh?
But we do. We've assigned people to do it, and had people do it.
Because they didn't,
They won't, yeah.
they won't do it.
I just have a couple of questions,
Thank
and
you.
I apologize for not getting them to you sooner.
Sure.
On that US 12, the county, on behalf of the state, will make one pass in the spring and one pass in the fall.
You're kidding.
It takes 6 feet off of each side, and that's all they do. So, John, when Mike was here previously, we had talked about a schedule. I'm looking at least on my computer, it's page 122 out of 134 in this. At the bottom of it, it lists US 12 green, red, blue, and pink sections. I just don't know which one of those are trash pickup, or if they're all trash pickup, or if they're all mowing, but it says weekly and monthly. I'm just trying to figure out how often will they mow that area, because I would agree with Trustee Peterson, people use it as a dumping ground. And then how often will they pick up garbage? Because I see they're only contracted for 24 hours a month for the entire township for garbage pickup.
Correct.
I was just wondering how often they might go out there. Are they going to go out there weekly, bi-weekly, monthly for the garbage pickup? And then how often will they mow that area, if we know?
It's supposed to be weekly for both, if I'm
For both?
not mistaken. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Because they have 6 members on their crew, which is why their price was more than some of the others for trash collection.
Yeah, and that's what that was going to be the follow-up. I didn't know if it would be you or the clerk. I'm looking at the different costs, and their cost for garbage pickup for 24 hours is $58,800, yet one of them was only $9,600.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how they get the same bid and they have such a discrepancy.
And that comes to the amount of staff picking up trash, because it was, that company was reached out and they just said that they have 1 person collecting trash and Looking Good has 6. So I don't know why there's such a discrepancy in workers, but that was what the answer was when inquired.
From the company at $9,600?
Yes. Because it's only $50 an hour compared to $350.
Yeah, it's $350 an hour. So I'm guessing they're going to have multiple people doing it?
They do, and he actually sends pictures every time they go out with what they've done for the week.
Okay.
I think the contract says 4 people.
Oh, well, I was told 6, so I apologize.
I think well,
Would that change,
she picking up stuff and,
would that change the hourly rate then? If they're $50 an hour or $50? It says $350 an hour for garbage pickup.
Correct.
And you thought that was based off 6 people doing it?
Well, 6 people being out, yes.
Okay. But if it's only 4, would that cost then go down?
I don't believe so. No, I believe the $350 an hour is what they put in the contract, because that is what they charged previously. So that's what they based it off of.
yeah.
I was just gonna, my computer died, or I was looking for that for you, but Stan, if you recall, at the last board meeting, we removed this from the agenda to have Dave come back in and clarify some of these things, and myself, John, and Belinda all met to make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward, and as you guys know, Looking Good Lawns has done a lot of work for us in the past, and they've been extremely helpul, like if residents call in and have things, they'll go out. I'm almost certain last year, Dave Dillon, they picked up a porta potty for us, so like, if, whatever the request is, if we have it, they will do it. And then, we went out to bid, just kind of make sure our numbers were okay, and also to just have something to like adhere to, like this is what we're paying, and this is what we're gonna be moving forward with in good faith together, so.
So again, how long will they be with the township? The entire
Our
summer, or
contract
going
is-
all the way up to February, fall?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it
2 years.
expires after next year, yes.
I can't remember the dates that in front of me. It's April to November, October.
October 31st.
Yes.
All right,
Sorry,
thank you.
that's from memory.
Thank you.
And we will verify how many people, because that should determine how much to pay.
Okay, yeah.
I know it's in here somewhere. I read it somewhere or saw something somewhere. And it was interesting to me, the total price, they were less. But like you said, the trash pickup was so much less than, maybe they're just trying to get the bid, I don't know.
Well, and I'm looking at the third company charges roughly 40% more, 45% more for the mowing services. So I'm just trying to figure out what, Looking Good's price for mowing is substantially less than one of the bidders, yet their price is substantially higher than both of the other bidders for the garbage pickup. And I'm just trying to figure out what the discrepancy could be when you have the same bid specs. I get it if it's 1 person versus 6, that I get. But you have a third company, and I'm just trying to figure out what the discrepancy is. And then if I could, I'm looking again at that list of where they're going to take care of things. And just to speak to Trustee Peterson's comment about the entry points, if you're coming across Huron Street from the city into the township, headed southbound, on the right-hand or the west side of the road, there's that big triangle of grass there that seems to be a collector. I don't know if that's, I don't see it on this list, but if that could be included, that triangle to keep that clean, because that truly is the entry point, at least to the south end, or one of them.
That can definitely be added.
Thank you.
And I also do want to clarify, part of this agreement was that they are also the only bidder for the OCS part of the bid sheet that went out but last October. So that was also included in this agreement as well. Good.
Because if there's court-ordered ordinance pickups, and we just had one this week where Merritt Road, and I don't know how many calls we received on it, but people just trashed it. I mean, couches and like bags upon bags of stuff was thrown out. So we sent them out to just pick it up, because someone's got to pick it up. Even though it's not on the list, we just send them out. Ordinance investigated it, tried to figure it out, and they couldn't find out who. Sometimes people leave evidence in their bags that we've caught some people that way. But so they went and cleaned it, cleaned it up and disposed of it. It was $900, but it was it was just a lot of, who does that? But they're doing it more and more. I mean, I don't. Mr. Winter?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure, I'm still stuck on this Gulf Village thing in my mind about these rats, but I just wanted to add, I think there was a contract that the city and the township entered into over how they were going to share the costs for the entryway coming into the township. I think that included the mowing.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's still, I mean, it was supposed to be for the mowing. I would assume it also would include the trash removal. I think there is a separate agreement already in place between the city and the township. Whether or not that has to be folded into this agreement, I'm not really sure, but there is a commitment already in place between the two entities that share the entryway.
So, what's that?
So it's a sheer, so, that's right. My file's not complete, yeah, it's complete in that regard. But I do think there is a contract out there that has to be probably looked at to make sure that we live up to our commitment that was made it was a requirement of MDOT as I recall.
You're correct. The city is going to keep the bridge pathways clean, like in the snow removal, because we don't have a snow removal crew. And in exchange, the township does the mowing of those interchanges.
I think I include that area that Stan was talking about in regards to.
Yeah, the clover link, is that what you call it?
Well, that's on our side. I think we're going to do the grass on the north side.
Both.
Yeah.
Both,
But
yeah.
we've done it in the past. We did the grass on the north side just to help them out because they didn't have it.
Yeah, and so you are right, Mr. Winter.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Take a break? What do we have?
Waiting?
I could've-
How you doing?
What would you see about like the wall behind my house up on that island about cutting that down? Would I talk to Brenda about that? The wall out there on Mary Capital Lori behind my house. There's a wall up there with a bunch of trees and stuff that are not my wall. Would I ask Brenda? Yeah. Okay. up on the, yeah, up on the. Okay, but I just wanted to know, the trees and things that are hanging over my section.
Do you know Jenny Wilson?
That's why I told you, there's a lot of people, you know, that I don't know.
And then he'll call MDOT.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about cleanup day. Dropping some chlorine.
I don't know if I
But
needed
you gonna
to.
give me the numbers right
Oh,
now.
honey, shoot, I forgot.
What is it for? She's gonna give me a number as far as the wall behind my house.
I'll let her. I was thinking if I had a chance.
Yeah, she was gonna give it to me, that's all I was just asking for. Young lady, OSHA and the inspectors is not gonna let them get away with a lot of stuff, the guys from the concrete, so I used to be a heavy equipment operator, so I knew a lot of that he was talking about. But OSHA and the inspectors is not gonna let you get away with it. And I've been on a job with them, they couldn't, saying cave this guy's chest in, and they turned around and took the excavator and took the man's head off and killed him. So it's a dangerous job.
So this, I'll write down.
Hey, Tad.
Jimmy is your statement.
How you doing?
And he has a direct connection.
Okay.
But I don't quite understand exactly what it's saying.
This old mayor's got the lorry, the wall be clean and all the stuff is hanging on my side.
It was already in there.
I've never had it.
Never came up before.
I got some sidewalks down there that need to be done too, so. Oh, yeah. No, I'm talking about like, I usually try to keep my area clean and help the seniors out in my area. I was telling her, OSHA and, the inspectors not gonna let you get away with a lot of that stuff. This guy was talking about over there in Gulf Village. But, you know what they need to do? Yeah. As far as the undercarriage of the sand, they got to test them soil samples. Soil samples on there when they take that kind. Yeah, but what, if they take it up?
They're not.
Oh, okay.
They're leaving it intact.
Oh, that's what they getting away the slick way.
Well, that's the safest way, right?
Yeah,
That's the safest.
you don't know what's up under it. Thank you, dear.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'll text him too.
Okay, thank you.